Hello everyone, my name is Brendan Snyder. Thank you so much for joining me and welcome to Top 10 Rock Albums by Ladies of the 80s. So the 80s itself was one of the best times and provided some of the best rock music. It was also a time when ladies were more prominent than ever, showcasing their skills in what was generally considered an all-boys club. But, not to be outdone, they certainly held their own, making some of the best albums of the decade. So join me as we count down the top 10 rock albums by ladies of the 80s. However, before we get started in that, if you are new to my channel and haven't already hit the subscribe button, please click the button. Also leave a comment, hit like, all of those things help support my channel. I would greatly appreciate it. And of course, as an added bonus, by subscribing, you'll be able to stay up to date on all that's going on in the world of music, just like this with top 10 rock albums by ladies of the 80s. So before we get started, I'd like to give an honorable mention to bands like The Pretenders, Girl School, Joan Jett, all worthy. So many great albums of the 80s, just not all of these ladies could fit in there. I also want to clarify that what I'm looking at here is that the primary lead vocalist is the woman, and so I chose not to include Fleetwood Mac in this list because Stevie Nicks is not the primary vocalist. She is one of two co-vocalists, being Lindsey Buckingham and her, so they are not part of this list, and that is at least the reason there. But kicking things off here, we're going to jump right into the top 10 rock albums by ladies of the 80s. And the first one up at number 10, Rock Goddess, Hell Hath No Fury from 1983. Second studio album from the new wave of British heavy metal band formed in 1977 by sisters Jodie and Julie Turner. And this album here rocks with full aggression, just charging through and through. And Jodie Turner's vocals on here have a tough, powerful strength to them that emanates through each of the songs. You just can't help but want to get up, move around, pump your fist in the air. And the band itself, they're still active today, fronted by the two sisters themselves. Coming in at number 9, Toronto, Lookin for Trouble, 1980 debut studio album from the Canadian band out of Toronto, Ontario. The band is known for having been a stepping stone for powerhouse vocalist Holly Woods, also having written the song What About Love, which became a huge hit for another female-fronted rock band, Heart. We'll hear about them in a little bit later in this episode, but what the band, did, they did not place the song What About Love on the debut album, though the debut album still kicks and burns with much of the same fire as that song, making it totally worth checking out. Coming in at number 8, Ellen Foley, Another Breath, 1983. Third studio album from the Broadway singer turned performer with Meat Loaf and Jim Steinman, turned actor with reoccurring role on TV show Night Court. So Ellen has proven herself to be a very versatile woman, but this album here, in my opinion, is where she really shines. It's just filled with her trademark vocals that really pushed Meat Loaf's Paradise by the Dashboard Light over the top. The album itself also has some really amazing songwriters on it: Robert Palmer, Desmond Child, Glenn Ballard, and of course, Ellen Foley herself. All right, and what list of ladies from the 80s would be complete without none other than Lita Ford, coming in at number 7 with her album Lita, 1988, third studio album from her, from the one-time band member of the all-female 70s rock band The Runaways. And Lita came up the hard way, just pushing and muscling herself through the all-boys club back in the 70s, proving she could play guitar with the best of them. And this album here even scored a duet with none other than Ozzy Osbourne on the song Close My Eyes Forever, which would have secured this album itself a place in history all on its own. But it's actually the solid, rock rest of the album itself and songs like Back to the Cave and Kiss Me Deadly that makes this album such a classic and worthy of this list. Coming in at number 6, Femme Fatale's self-titled release 1988 debut studio album from the glam metal band that features frontwoman Lorraine Lewis. So their brand of hard rock features all of the grit and sleaze of the 80s hard rock scene, and done just as good as the All Boys Club. MTV really gave them a lot of play, featuring 2 of their songs, Waiting for the Big One and Falling In and Out of Love. And while it did translate into a $250,000 in sales, unfortunately it was not enough to keep the band together, and they folded after just the one album. Later on, though, they would release a posthumous album of demos that was recorded between 1989 and 1990, while they were, of course, still trying to make it as a band. Both albums are worth checking out if you can come across them. Coming in at number 5, Vixen's self-titled release, 1988 debut studio album from the all-female member band that formed way back in 1980. The band melded the perfect amount of rock, glam metal, and even pop into just a really outstanding album that stood out from the rest of their peers at the time, turning heads, and not just because they were all very attractive ladies. You know, these Vixens could seriously play their instruments, they could hold their own, and that's proven by the fact of their 2 top 40 Billboard hits that they had, Edge of a Broken Heart and Cryin'. And the album itself is just, in my opinion, one of my favorites of the glam metal era. Coming in at number 4, Fiona's self-titled release, 1985 debut studio album, who has connections to, interestingly, both Winger and Bob Dylan. More on that in just a bit, but the album itself features the amazing raw and intense vocals of Fiona herself, but there's also some amazing backing musicians on here. Bobby Mazzano on guitar from Stars and Joe Franco on drums from Twisted Sister. And her later albums would feature members of Winger on it, as well as she would appear in Bob Dylan's Hearts of Fire video. So there's those 2 interesting connections. All of her albums, though, are totally worth checking out. Coming in at number 3, Bonnie Tyler, Secret Dreams and Forbidden Fire from 1986, 6th studio album from the Welsh singer, who had already achieved quite a bit of success before this amazing album. Her previous album, Faster Than the Speed of Night, was produced by Jim Steinman and featured the huge hit Total Eclipse of the Heart. But this album here, in my opinion, really took things to another level. It's a full-on Jim Steinman album, but instead of Meatloaf, we get the amazing Bonnie Tyler, and she really makes us proud on this album here. It features songs written by Jim Steinman, Desmond Child, and Bryan Adams, and just leaves a lot of that pop stuff behind from the previous albums, making this a total rock record of epic proportion. Coming in at number 2, Stevie Nicks' Rock a Little, 1985, 3rd solo album from the Fleetwood Mac band member, and just one of rock's most famous singers in her own right. Having already made her name with Fleetwood Mac, she did set out in the 80s to make a further name for herself, which she certainly does with the outstanding output of albums that she did. Any of them could have been in this position here, but in my opinion, this album is the creme de la creme of the 80s output. It built on everything of Fleetwood Mac's 1982 album Mirage, but I think it does it a lot better. And there's no one who quite sounds like Stevie, right? She's got both a tough and sultry voice all at the same time. Her emotion and vocal performance is the stuff of legend, as is the woman herself. And coming in, the number 1 spot has to be none other than Heart and their self-titled release from 1985. This spot could have really been held by any of their 80s catalog output, but this one here, the 8th studio album, is a testament to the big 70s era rock band making a huge comeback in the 80s, just reinventing themselves and showing how versatile they really could be. The album itself features some of the best powerhouse vocals from Ann Wilson, and not to be outdone by her sister, Nancy Wilson goes full throttle on the guitar, pulling out all the stops on songs like If Looks Could Kill, What About Love, These Dreams, and Never. All massive hits, giving the band a second life, showing that Ann and Nancy could do no wrong, which is why this album here comes in at the top spot. And so there you go. That is the top 10 rock albums by ladies of the 80s. I'm going to leave a link in the description if you want to check it out, to the top 10 rock albums of all time. And certainly if you've enjoyed this video, consider sharing it out on social media. I would greatly appreciate that. All right, I'm sure there's some bands and female-fronted rock artists out there that are not mentioned in here. Feel free to let me know your thoughts on all of that. Take care, have a great one, and I'll talk to you all real soon. Bye-bye, everyone.